Welcome everybody, welcome. Here we are in the first part of 2 modules looking at relationships. This part of the journey we will look at energy dynamics, our parents and children's relationships, family stories that we have in our energy. This is a big chunk as relationships are a big energy drain. Everything in our life is a relationship. We have relationships with everything from the objects around us, the food we eat, and the people in our lives. And the relationships you have all affect the relationship you have with yourself, and vice versa. The relationships are a powerful pull on our energy, and from a young age, our parents are the first people we create a dependency with. They are all we know. We learn everything about communication, love, how to express feelings like hate and anger, all from our parents before we are 7. And depending on who they are and how they behaved, influenced how you grew and how you behave in relationships now. So many people are unconscious about the impact of their communication, their patterns, their impact on people. And the way adults reacted to us then is often the way we react towards ourselves now, both positively and negatively. If you think about when you're telling yourself off, can you hear your mother or father using those very same words? What words did they use when they praised you? Or perhaps they didn't praise you? If we all only parent in the way we're shown, how many generations of thinking are we living out? So this is why we get drawn into the family dynamics. We don't know any other way until we become aware of it and consciously choose to make a difference. And most people are unaware and behave as if they're powerless and take the knocks of life as if they can't control things. And they place blame outside of them rather than realising that they are powerful and actually can create their life by doing what's right for them through changing their thoughts and beliefs. So we want to stop passing on the ways of communicating that we've learnt from our friends, families, colleagues, partners and children. This is about changing ourselves so that we can change our relationships, and we're going to be fully responsible for our own life and to empower ourselves. We've learnt how to behave in relationships before the age of 3. Our mental and emotional development is hinged on things happening at different parts of our life. So if we witness things at a young age, we've internalised these behaviours at an unconscious level. We're like sponges before the age of 3 and then up to the age of 7. And we're designed to absorb information. It doesn't do much thinking for itself, but our brain starts to learn from our environment and we start mimicking this as it's the only input that we've had. So on an energetic foundation as we grow, it's based on our base chakra. It's our grounding, our security, our safety. And energetically, if we have a rocky childhood, that foundation isn't stable. And then we have ongoing impact as we move through different stages in our lives as the foundation's not solid. So this base chakra formed early on in our life and based on interactions between people, in the sense we are a product of our circumstance. And most people hopefully brought up in a loving environment, but unless people are conscious to what we're doing, then what we saw influences us now. And as we get older, the relationships we developed will repeat with our own children, and they have a massive significance on our lives. We might choose our work based on this, and this is why we consider ourselves, our thoughts and emotions overall before we look at our passion and purpose. So these relationships have huge meanings for us. So any unhealthy interactions we have impact on our lives on a day-to-day basis. So do you remember me talking about the balance of yin and yang? And when you think about a relationship with anyone, there is always more yin energy and a more peaceful, gentle, down-to-earth person. And there is a more talkative, outward, stronger energy for the other person. Every relationship has this. So with people, the woman is typically yin compared to her male partner who is more yang. But actually both are yin and both are yang. And it's similar for the same-sex partners as it is for heterosexual couples. It's not about anatomy, it's all about energy. So yin qualities are female energy, softness, being passive, heaviness, coolness, feeling and surrender. And yang attributes are male energy, hardness, being assertive, heat, thinking. And the yang partner offers yang energy in exchange for yin, and the yin partner receives yang and gives back yin energy. So listening is one of the strongest yin characteristics. When someone genuinely listens to you, that person is being yin because he or she is hearing and yielding to your words. And there'll be times in any relationship when this means that to be receptive, yin, you put aside your own expectations and remain generous and loving to your partner's needs. And then standing up for yourself and stating what you need in the relationship from your partner is a yang action. And this is an important part of your bond, but even this changes with time and circumstances. And the energetic interplay of yin and yang is a continuous ebb and flow. Each of us uses yang energy for some tasks and yin energy for others. So keep this in mind next time your relationship hits a speed bump or your partner is driving you crazy. Regardless of what is going on, somewhere there is a common thread that weaves you together, and all relationships need to have this balance of yin and yang to work. It's the natural balance of communication, and there'll always be one slightly stronger and one slightly more inwards. And when you can find that balance, that's when a harmonious relationship is created. And if the scales get tipped, someone gets too yang, too pushy, or too yin, too submissive, that's when it falls into one of the energy dynamics that I'm going to introduce you to. Many women are becoming more masculine in energy, more driven, more career driven, and stepping away from that traditional feminine role, doing it with a push, more masculine energy. So this is stopping women from being more feminine than they could be. So it has to impact on the other side, for the most masculine person isn't as masculine in the balance. It's this balance of yin and yang that creates the sexual chemistry between people. If this balance of yin and yang is out of sync, that will impact on our sexual drive with our partners. And I'm not talking about sex only. This is in every relationship, with parents, with friends. There's always a natural balance. So in a partnership, this is where the power play comes, mismanagement of yin and yang energy. So let me introduce you to the energy drains triangle from the energy alignment method, which is based on the drama triangle, also known as the Cartman triangle, which was developed by the psychiatrist Stephen Cartman in the early 1970s. Now I want to talk you through the Cartman model so that you understand it first, and then we'll apply the energetic model to it. Now this triangle represents the relationship between two people. So you have the persecutor, rescuer and victim, and they represent different roles that people can play. It's not the people themselves, but a role. And the role interlocks, and there's always someone on the top who seems to have more power and someone on the bottom. And the relationship moves about in a circle as follows. So that, for example, the person in the rescuer position, that person in that role essentially has a nice guy control, and he hooks into the victim, and the person in that role feels overwhelmed at times. And he feels that problems are falling down on his head. And then the rescuer steps in and says, I can help you out. Just do what I say and everything will be fine. And oftentimes, couples will begin their relationships in some form of this. They psychologically cut a deal. The rescuer says, I will agree to be strong, good and nice. And the victim says, I will agree to be overwhelmed and unable to manage. And everyone's happy. And the rescuer feels needed, important and in charge. And the victim has someone to take care of him. And it works fine, except every once in a while one of two things happens. Sometimes the rescuer gets tired of doing it all. He feels like he is shouldering all the responsibilities, and the other is not pulling his weight, not giving anything back, not appreciating what the rescuer is doing. And the rescuer gets fed up, angry and resentful. And then, bam, you've got an explosion. He shifts over to the persecutor role. He suddenly blows up, usually about something minor, the laundry, who didn't take out the rubbish, or acts out. He might go out and spend a lot of money, go on a drinking binge, have an affair. He feels he deserves it. Look, after all, he says to himself, at what I've been putting up with. So the message underneath the behaviour and the anger that usually doesn't come out very clearly is, why don't you grow up? Why don't you take some responsibility? Why do I have to do everything around here? Why don't you appreciate what I'm doing for you? This is unfair. So the feeling of unfair is a strong one. Now at this point, the victim gets scared and moves up to the rescuer position and tries to make up and calm the waters. I'm sorry, he says. I didn't realise. I really do appreciate what you do and I'll do better. And then the persecutor feels bad about whatever he said or did, and then goes down to the victim position and gets depressed. And then they both stabilise and go back to their original positions. Now the other thing that happens sometimes is the victim gets tired of being the victim. He gets tired of the other one always running the show, always telling him what to do. He gets tired of being looked down on because the rescuer is basically saying, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't make it. And every once in a while, the victim gets fed up and then explodes, moves back to the persecutor role, and like the rescuer, the victim is in this role, blows up and gets angry, usually about something small, or acts out. And again, the message underneath that doesn't get said is, why don't you get off my back? Leave me alone. Stop controlling my life. Back off. I can do things myself. And the rescuer hears this and then moves to the victim position. So he then says to himself, pull me every time I try to help. Look what I get. And the persecutor then feels bad about whatever he did or said and goes to the rescuer position and says something like, I was stressed out. I was off my medication. I'm tired from the kids. I'm so sorry. And then they make up and go back to where they originally were. Now, while everyone gets to move among the roles, often one will fit more comfortably in one role more than the other. And this has to do with personality, with your upbringing and your learned ways of coping. And the rescuer as a child was often an only child or the oldest, or grew up in a chaotic family. He usually didn't have many buffers between him and his parents and learned early on that he could avoid getting into trouble and avoid conflict by being good. So if I can stay on my toes and just do what my parents or my teacher wants me to do, I won't get into any hot water. Now, this type of person learns to be very sensitive to others as a means of survival, and he develops a good radar and can pick up the nuances of emotions. Hyper alert, spends all their energy surveying the environment around them, staying on their toes, ever ready to do what their parents want them. And essentially they're taking the position of, I'm happy if you're happy, and I need to make sure you're happy. And they get rewarded for being good, and their head can be filled with shoulds. So, of course, what works for the child doesn't necessarily work so well for the adult. So now the world is bigger, and rather than 2 or 3 more important people to pay attention to, the rescuer adult has many more. The boss, the taxman, the chair of the PTA, just for example, and now can feel pulled in a lot of directions, stretched thin, and as they scramble to accommodate what they think others want from them, start to feel like a martyr and is always at risk of burnout. And they also have a hard time knowing what they want because they spent so much of their energy as a child looking outward and doing what others wanted. They never had the opportunity to sit back and decide what they wanted. And wanting, unlike following shoulds and rules, is a feeling, and they often aren't aware of what they are feeling. So as an adult, if you ask them, but what do you want? They hesitate and they get stuck and worry about making the right decision, about not offending anyone in their life, or the critical voice in their head. And they also have a hard time with anger and conflict, which is why they become good in the first place and tend to stuff anger down until they get fed up and begin to really choke on it, and then they'll blow up. And because it's so uncomfortable with it and it creates so much drama, they then feel like this is terrible, and then they'll feel guilty and shove it back down again, only to have it build up again, that cycle to go round. And then you have the victim in contrast. As a child was often the youngest in the family and overprotected as a child by parents, or had older siblings who stepped in and took over all the time when they were stuck with a problem. And what they missed in growing up were opportunities to develop the self-confidence that comes from learning to manage problems on your own, and then now as an adult easily get overwhelmed, feel unconfident, anxious. So to handle these feelings, looks to the rescuer who takes over and then helps them to feel better. So the persecutor is the twin to the rescuer. Whereas the rescuer controls by being good and nice, the persecutor is angry, critical and blaming. And this is the abuser, and obviously some couples start with this persecutor-victim relationship, playing out childhood models and roles. And the persecutor learned early on I get scared, I get tough. And if I can negatively control everything going on around me, no one can sneak up behind me and get me. So how do you stop the drama? So if you look at the bottom of this picture, you'll see a line, adult to adult, a straight line. Now, the person that's not in a role is being more complete, proactive rather than reactive, self-responsible rather than blaming, and is outside of the triangle. So adults are peers. They're on the same level in terms of power, and this is where you want to be. So the adult says, I'm responsible for what I think, do and say. If something bothers me, it's my problem. If you can do something to help me with my problem, I need to tell you because you can't read my mind. And if you decide not to help me, I'll need to decide what I'm going to do to next fix my problem. And similarly, if something bothers you, it is your problem. If there's something I can do to help you with your problem, you need to tell me. And if I decide not to help you with your problem, you can work it out. You may not handle it the way I might, but you can do it. I don't need to take over. So 2 of the problems the rescuer and the victim have in their relationship is that they do a lot of mind reading. You should know what is going on or how to help without my having to say so, and then feel angry, disappointed or frustrated when the other doesn't mind read. They also have a distorted sense of responsibility. So the rescuer tends to be over-responsible. Your problems are my problems. I'm happy if you're happy, and it's my job to make sure you're happy. And in the attempt to make the victim happy, the victim over time begins to feel pressure and control, which then sets up the explosion. And similarly, the victim tends to be under-responsible. My problems are your problems. I expect you to fix them, and I either have to wait or manipulate you into doing so. Whereas the adults, in contrast, are clear about who has the problem. And this is represented by this horizontal line running between them. So if you feel it's yours. This is a key concept and one invaluable for couples to understand and incorporate. By being aware of who has the problem, the individuals can avoid the defensiveness, anxiety, control and manipulation of couples caught in that triangle. And they also can be more intimate. The problem the rescuer and the victim face in their relationship is that the roles, which is not the people themselves but only parts of them, keep them stuck. And the rescuer cannot let his guard down or get too vulnerable because he's afraid that the victim will not be able to handle it. And similarly, the victim can't ever get too strong because the rescuer will feel threatened and out of a job. And then the long line between the victim and rescuer is real. It represents that emotional distance between them. Whereas the adults don't have this problem because both can be responsible, strong, yet honest and vulnerable. They can take risks and aren't locked in roles and hence can be more open and intimate. And 2 people can obviously be in this pattern for a long time, seemingly getting along, suddenly having some acting out or emotional explosion, making up and then returning to their roles and then repeating the pattern over and over again. And sometimes, particularly for the rescuer, this will continue until they eventually drop from the weight of it all and it affects them physically or they'll have some psychological breakdown. And what can also happen over time, and what often happens and brings couples into therapy, is that one person is either tired of going around the cycle or begins to outgrow the role that he is in. And then, like any other pattern, it takes 2 to play the game. And as soon as one person begins to move into that adult position, the other gets scared and will try to pull him back to keep it going. So the classic case for this is the codependent of an alcoholic. So the wife, for example, begins to attend the support groups for alcoholics and starts to tell her husband, Jake, I'm not going to call up your boss for you on Monday and tell him you're sick. You can call him yourself, and I'm not going to pick you up off the front lawn on Saturday night if you get drunk. Now what's happening here is the wife is stepping out of the triangle, and if Jake got drunk before, he's going to get rip-roaring drunk now to try and hook his wife back in. And if that doesn't work, Jake is likely to switch to one of the other roles. He may shift to the persecutor, get angry, threaten divorce, the custody of the kids, or cut off money. He may get nice, tell her how he's going to start going to AA meetings to appease her and to bring her back. And then similarly, if the victim moves to the adult position, the rescuer feels threatened. So this is often seen in empty nest stages of marriage. The husband's been more or less been in charge, making most of the big decisions, financially supporting the family, and then the kids begin to leave home. So things start to change, and the wife might say something like, I'm thinking of maybe going back to school. I never finished my degree because, I stayed at home with the kids and now it's a good time to do it. And maybe I'll go back into full-time work. I like to get my own current and savings account so I can have more money and my own money and be more independent. And whilst the husband knows what to do when his wife is in that dependent on him mode, in that one down position, he doesn't know what to do when this shifts. And generally the first thing he'll do is instinctively is to be nice, but try to talk his wife out of the changes. So why do you want to go back to school now? You're 45 years old. What are you going to be able to do with a degree? It's going to cost us 30 grand for tuition. You don't need to get a full-time job. This is the time to take it easy. We don't need another current account. It's going to cost £10 a month in fees, which we don't need to spend. Underneath that is stay put And so if that doesn't work, then he may shift to the persecutor role and get angry. If you want to go to school, you find a way to pay for it. We're not taking it out of our retirement. Or he might move to the victim position and get depressed, so his wife needs to stay at home and to take care of him. So how do you stop the drama? The challenges of both partners moving to the adult position are several. The natural feeling of the one left behind is that if you care, you'll stay in the triangle. And if they both move, the partners need to develop new ways of showing that they care for each other. There'll be a period of transition while these new ways are being created, and the new ways will not, at least for a while, feel as good as the old ways. There are also the challenges of learning new skills, especially for the one that's feeling left behind. And the reason the triangle is so strong and works is because the roles are complementary. Each sees in the other what he's unable to see in himself. The rescuer, for example, is not as nice or strong as he thinks, but he sees his vulnerability and anger in the victim and persecutor. And the victim's not as weak as he thinks, but projects his strength and anger onto the rescuer and the persecutor. And the persecutor's not as tough as he thinks, but only sees his weakness and goodness in the victim and rescuer. So we're projecting. Now, to be successful, each must learn to recognise and incorporate what has been left out. The rescuer needs to learn to recognise his wants and take the risk of not being good and over-responsible. He needs to learn how to recognise his anger and then use it as information about what he wants. Recognise his feelings. And he needs to experiment with letting go and resist the impulse to fix their own anxiety by taking over when the other is struggling, and needing to learn how to let their guard down so that they can trust and be vulnerable and nurture in a genuine, caring way, rather than out of fear and out of the need of control. And then on the other hand, similarly, the victim needs to build up their self-confidence by not taking risks and doing things on their own, by using the rescuer not as a rescuer but as a support. They need to learn how to partialise problems so they don't feel overwhelmed. So like the rescuer needs to tap into their anger and use it to better define their boundaries and wants. So the relationship triangle gives you a way of conceptualising the dynamics of a relationship. And so many people are operating in this unconscious dynamic. And this is where everybody else is at fault. No one is accepting responsibility for their actions and their alignment. This is where life happens to people. And the basis of this understanding is a victim energy. It's not my fault. They don't take responsibility for the good stuff and the bad stuff. And so for me, I want to inspire people to realise that all the good and the bad is down to us and what we have put out on an energetic basis. And the Karpman-Dreimer triangle is based on transactional analysis. So what makes a relationship flip between this emotional game? The story involves a series of interactions that look like honest interactions, but actually they're not. They have a hidden meaning and there is a predictable payoff to the people involved. How does this all fit in energetically? Well, the energy drains model takes this one step further and on an energetic level describes how there is a push and a pull between each role. So we have a two-way transaction. So the drama triangle is one we play out unconsciously in so many positions, and we often have that default position. And we can flit, as I've described, between the different positions on the triangle, depending on who we're talking to and the different relationships we have. And that's what makes the drama continue. And any film or soap opera usually has this energetic power play going on. And then, of course, because we see this in our families and on screen, we think it's normal. It's not normal. We do not want to live in that soap opera. So we're going to become conscious about our communications and in our transactions and how we're disempowering ourselves and how we can contain our energy for ourselves so that it serves ourselves. So remember, two energies that are moving in opposite direction create that tension and resistance. And in each of these dynamics, there is a push and pull of energy. So the pusher energy is not only directing energy at the puller, they're also receiving blame energy back from that puller. And if that person is pushing their energy back against the protector who is also defending their position, so the puller is not only being pushed on by the pusher, they're also drawing energy in from the protector. Exhausting, right? And the protector is not only pushing onto the pusher, they're also drawing energy on the puller by taking their power away, and not encouraging them to support themselves. It's an energy drain as everyone is pulling and pushing energy. In the movies, the pusher is the baddie. They're pushing their energy onto someone else, and normally it's seen as an attack. So this is the pusher energy. They gain their power by feeling superior. They're the ones in the right. And then you have the protector energy, the ones who ride in to save the day. They always support the puller. They get their energy for saving the day, intervening, and they'll support the puller energy. And the puller energy is using drawing energy on the protector, and they like to give the power away by blaming the pusher. And they behave in a way that deems that they're powerless in their situation. So these are the underlying themes.
So let's dive into these energies.
So the puller energy, this is the powerlessness consciousness. This is the one that is most prevalent in any relationship. If you think about many families, and not all, if we ask directly for what we want, we can be shamed or called names. You're selfish, you're spoilt, you're greedy. And this is based on a human belief that there's not enough of something to go around, whether that's time, money, attention, food, kindness. And the reason this whole mentality is created is usually when we're young. I want that ice cream. No, you can't have it. Can't have what you want. You're greedy. So often asking for what you want is a big no-no. And so people go without. And then that creates the belief of lack. I don't have money. We can't do that. I'm too busy with my work. I can't give you a cuddle right now as I'm on my phone. And again, that's all contributing to that mentality of lack. And the only way around this is to find ways to get people to give you what you want without asking for it. So manipulating others to give you things is the only safe way to do this without people blaming you. So that's the learned helplessness, is a mindset that we've learned. So they see powerlessness as a way to change things. They become unable to respond to opportunities in their lives. And learned helplessness is just a belief, so it's easy to let it go. And you know if you're in this energy, if you feel powerless to make changes, and if you're giving excuses, we all have it. It's the strongest one in most people. I know I spent many years as this person. I spent a long time as the puller. And when I wasn't in that role, I was the protector. And then sometimes I'd be the pusher, but mostly I was the puller or the protector. It was the safest one to be. Poor me, the poor person that people want to look after. And the puller energy keeps you stuck in fear, powerlessness, depression and guilt, and blaming others for the way life is, where you're giving your power away to someone else. And how can you possibly create an abundant life when you're holding this energy? Now the pusher, or the persecution and judgment energy. The most common way we avoid looking at ourselves is to push our beliefs, thoughts and feelings onto someone else, and we make it about their words and behaviours. We make our judgments the right ones, and what everyone else is thinking is wrong. So when you find yourself judging someone, you're probably in the pusher energy. Everyone does have their own perception of right and wrong, and if you're coming from a place of feeling righteous or judgment of others, because we know we're in that right and then follow up with anger or blame, we're just projecting our resistant energy onto those people. And deep down, the pusher is usually hurt people, and is trying to disperse that onto something by venting out onto someone else. And it's just been learnt from a young age. Most people don't model taking responsibility, so we're taught to blame someone else. And not many people are taught to take that place of, yes, I shouldn't have done that. And the great thing about that is it stops the drama. So no one can say anything more when you take responsibility for your part. So we see this in every area of our society. It's the belief that if we shout loud enough, or point the finger long enough, or threaten someone to behave, we'll get what we want. And we see this in politics. It comes from that energy of the pusher and projecting that resistant energy in that direction. And by sharing in this way, by pushing against the things you don't want to see, the energy you give to that person or that situation is just empowering that situation even more. Basically, it comes down to that. You get more of what you give. And energetically, of course, it then keeps us stuck in that emotion of anger and hatred and blame, and is disempowering. So as you push more energy into that situation, it makes it worse. If you just think of a mother shouting at her child, for example, will you just sit down and shut up and behave? Do you want to sit down and behave, or do you want to push against it? How is that going to play out? Anything coming across as a push, the only thing that will happen will be a pushback. So if you want people to come in the direction that you want, it's your job to create the energy to allow them to step forwards in a way that you want to go. Now let's talk about the rescuer, or feeling obligated, so the protector energy. So the protector is always there, does the right thing, saving you from yourself. This is a life based on codependency, which we've touched on. There is a huge body of work on codependency, but basically where one person enables addiction, poor mental health, underachievement, allows them to be the victim. So this person often takes the power by doing you a favour you never asked for. Then they expect you to return the favour and be grateful for what they've done and return the favour without them having to ask for it. So they get their needs met by being the good guy, recognition from that, and they get their needs met by the return favour that they've never had to ask for. And they'll get upset if you don't do the favour. They'll become the victim because you were so mean, you didn't appreciate them, and then all of a sudden they're in that victim energy in connection to you. So it's really confusing, really draining, and of course it happens on a daily basis. And it's based on manipulation and control. And the purpose of this role is taking care of someone without them having to ask for it. So this position keeps us stuck in feelings like worry, overwhelm, frustration and irritation. These are at the bottom end of the emotional scale. They fight with the pullers, they're doing all the stuff for them, fight with themselves as they're not supporting themselves, and then outside they're the goodies. So they have got it all coming from all directions. And you know when you're in this role, when you're doing something you don't want to do, when you're doing it because you feel that feeling of obligation. So this role, it disempowers you and it disempowers others. So rescuers are disempowering other people. As ever, take time to nurture yourself as you're doing this work. I look forward to seeing you on the group call. Much love. Take care. Bye-bye.